Welcome to my video series on holding. I spent a lot of time on this topic during my instrument training programs, and holding is one of the first procedures that we teach students following basic flying. Mastery of holding lays a good foundation for more advanced procedures, including approaches. Holding comes up in a lot of different situations. Of course, there is the obvious need to delay our advance toward our destination. The second is to delay at a fix when the Class E airspace is occupied in a non-radar environment. Holding entry procedures are used as course reversals prior to final approach at the start of an instrument approach. This is the most common reason why you'll be asked to hold. The normal starting point in teaching holding is to teach holding entries first. I'm going to take a different approach in this video and start by describing how to maintain situational awareness while entering and flying the hold using a VOR or GPS indications. The ability to gauge your position relative to the hold using full-scale deflection is very useful in both entering and in holding in general. This is particularly important in strong winds. The normal textbook picture is often distorted by winds, late or early recognition of station passage, missing the station, and the various combinations of entry geometries. So we are not often exactly sure where we are relative to the holding pattern. The illustration that you're looking at shows a standard holding pattern divided into 4 quadrants. To simplify our discussion, let's assume that we are holding south of the fix and the inbound course is north. Also note the quadrant numbers that we will use for discussion purposes. Finally, all of this assumes that the OBS is set correctly, that is, to the inbound course. If not, all bets are off. Referring to the figure, you can see that the holding space, or the airspace around the holding fix, is divided into an upper side or northern side, which is quadrants 1 and 3, which we're calling the from side, and the southern space, which is quadrants 2 and 4, which we're calling the to side. It's also divided left and right by the holding side, which is on the right, and the non-holding side, which is on the left. There's a unique combination of deflections left and right on the CDI needle and the to from indicator in each one of the quadrants. For example, when we're in quadrant run, we will always see a from indication, and this course deviation indicator will indicate a left deviation. Similarly, in quadrant 2, we see a to indication with a left indication, and so forth around the quadrant. So it's important to note that these indications remain constant. For example, anytime, and that is anytime, we are in the northern half, that is on the from side, the to from indicator will indicate from. And conversely, anytime we're on the south side, that is the to side, the to from indicator will indicate to. And this is very helpful because occasionally you can miss the to from flip, and being able to look up at your to from indicator and immediately determine that you're in the from side will tell you to start your turn, albeit a bit late. Let's look at an example where this is going to be very useful. Let's assume that you're approaching the holding fix from the east with a very strong tailwind. So now we cross the fix and we're being blown well into quadrant 4. It's quite possible in this case to make a nearly 270-degree turn and still be in quadrant 4. If you're not aware of this situation, you could continue on some goofy heading, perhaps 300 or something like that, hoping that you'll eventually get intercept of the inbound course, which of course will never happen. However, if you had been watching your left-right indicator, your CDI, you'd realize immediately that you remained in quadrant 4 and never crossed into quadrant 2, which is the normal picture that we expect to see a parallel holding. A similar thing can happen if we're approaching the holding fix from the west with a strong headwind. In that case, we'll cross the holding fix and make a 90-degree turn to the outbound heading. Since the 90-degree turn does not take very much distance, we can easily be blown into quadrant 4. So in that case, we'd be flying southbound, thinking we were on our outbound leg, and when we start to turn right to make an intercept, we will find we will never make that intercept because we're always in quadrant 4. Similar kinds of things happen with geometries in other directions, In some cases, we wind up in the to side when we should be in the from side, or the from side when we expect to be in the to side. So lack of awareness of that can cause real problems in trying to make an entry into the holding pattern. So the bottom line in all this is you should learn to develop an awareness, both the to-from indications and the left-right indications, that are appropriate during the different phases of entry or during the holding process itself. This will help you to avoid these really big mistakes that can happen when either the direction of entry or the winds blow you into a position that you're not really expecting. These kinds of situations lead people into situations where they'll never make the intercept of the inbound leg and never see an intercept. And on a check ride, it's a bust. So it's incumbent to remember these kinds of things and to practice watching the various deflections and to-from indications in the different quadrants and being aware of where you're at during the holding entry and the holding itself. The rules generally apply the same at intersection holds as they do for regular holds, except that in an intersection hold, we're working with a second VOR, the cross-radial VOR, which most people put on their number 2 VOR if they're so configured. We can apply the general rule if I'm approaching an intersection and I have my cross-radial set to the radial name. If the station is on my left, the needle will swing from left to right and vice versa. So that's very useful in holding. Now substitute the lack of a to-from indication for the left-right swing on our number 2 VOR. So as we approach the to set, which in the previous case was the to section, that is quadrant 1 and 3, the needle will swing from left to right. Now if the station were on our right as we were approaching the holding fix, then the needle would be shifting from right to left. The indications on our primary VOR are going to stay the same. If we're in the holding side, the needle will be left, and conversely, if we're on the non-holding side, the needle is going to be on our right. We'll finish this segment with some points to remember. When the OBS is set to the inbound course, on the holding side, the CDI will be deflected left for standard right-hand turn holds and right for non-standard or left-hand holds. In other words, it's opposite to the direction of holds. Or remember that when you're on the hold side, the CDI is deflected to the opposite side of the hold, and that also applies at intersection holds. The main part of the hold is always the to side. The top part of the pattern is the from side. And this applies to on-station holds, but not intersection holds, and we talked about intersection holds. Our next section is going to deal with hold entries. That's what everybody's been waiting for. Right,